All right. I think we're recording. Oh, man. It's like, I finally got it cool in here. This isn't going to mean anything to you because you're listening to the audio of this. But most of the day, I swear to you, there wasn't like an allegation it was going to rain. So I had the windows open and I was waiting all day for a breeze. And then it just never materialized. And it became hot and gross and sweaty like a butt crack all damn day. So I finally got the air on. I got it cooled off in here. It's comfortable for the first time in forever. I'm so thrilled. All right. Couple questions up front without graphics. So audio listeners don't freak out. We're just doing some bonus stuff because people sent in some last minute questions, and we'll go from there. All right. Let's get started, shall we?
All right. Just remember what I've taught you.
Oh no, that's the wrong graphic, John. Can't believe I screwed up the graphic. It's all right. We'll just go like this. It's fine. I forgot to press the graphic button.
What the fuck is that?
Yeah, I realize I can fix it here. Take that, title screen. All right. Back in business. Wow. It's sure as shit been a long time since we've been here, hasn't it? Oh, man. Man, what a day. What a week. What a time to be alive or something. Wow. All right. So let's there's a lot to cover. There's a lot of ground here. There's a lot of questions. I better get to the answers. So without further ado, after a nice long break, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, guys, gals, non-binary pals, friends, writers, makers, doers, dreamers, planners, cat enthusiasts, water drinkers, sun enthusiasts. Hey, everybody. Dreamers, hopers, planners, anybody who knows how to scrub like junk out of the back of a garbage can, anybody who's ever delighted in the sheer thrill of having warm towels come out of the dryer, people who come back to work after a break excited for once in their goddamn lives, and most importantly, the comrades. This is the Writer's Chat for June the 8th. Of course, yes, I'm getting like a million more questions. Of course I am. This is the Writer's Chat for June the 8th, and I am Twitch's only writing coach. Hi. It's really nice to be here. It's really nice to be back. This is delightful, isn't it? I have missed this even more than I missed the Monday stream, which, by the way, was excellent, and you should go check it out up there on YouTube, youtube.com/ I don't have the graphic up. youtube.com/John Adamus. Go listen to me yammer on about voice. It'll help make you a better writer. But tonight's going to be a good one. There's a pile of questions. So I don't have any flashy graphics for these. They came in late. So you're just going to have to look at me, hold up my phone, and then there's going to be, questions. So here we go. Question number 1. P.S. If you're new here, if this is the first time you're hearing this, the first time you're checking this out, hi. Here's how this works. If you're listening to this, you can submit questions wherever you're listening. Or if you're in chat, feel free to write them in chat. Or otherwise, come find me on social media, Awesome John on Twitter, and leave all the questions you want. But now somebody left some questions, so let's try and give them some answers. Also, I have to tell you this. These answers might not be like super kind. You'll see. How does one rekindle one's passion for writing after a long hiatus? Okay. That's question 1. Oof. Okay. Look, right here. You and me, right here. Look. If you are trying to get your passion back, you are not going to succeed. This is not a game. This is not a thing where you constantly jump from passion to passion, like we're playing a video game. And there's a little fuse, and then it ticks down, and then you'll fuck around and fail out, and then all of a sudden you recharge and it comes back. Chasing your passion leads to failure. Chasing your passion, say it with me now. Chasing your passion leads to failure, not long-term success, not long-term viability, not a career. This is an exercise in discipline. This is an exercise in knowing that you want to do this, and no force, strong, weak, gravitational, magnetic, whatever, no force is going to stop you. You have to know that. Independent of whether or not you're going to say it's good, you have to know that no matter what, you're going to put your ass in a goddamn chair and you're going to produce some art. That's the whole point here. If you are waiting for the confluence of who knows what astrological bodies and the wind to blow a certain way, and for somebody to come along and be like, oh, you should be passionate, you will not succeed. And I want you to succeed. But you have to get serious about this. And yeah, I'm questioning your seriousness if you're living from passion to passion. You take a break, that's fine. Totally cool. Everything's good. You need breaks. I just took a break. It makes a difference. Breaks are great. But your passion should always be there. It should always be there. It should always be there. And when it's not, when you have enough wiggle room to be all, oh, I don't know if I want to do this. Stop doing it. Go do something else. This is a thing where the passion has to be a constant roiling fire. And the thing that modifies it, the thing that makes a difference, is the education and your effort. You learn more and you do more. And if you're not willing to do that, because you're waiting for the passion fairy to come and slip like 25 cents, and some passion under your pillow, you're going to be waiting a good goddamn long time for your shit to get good. You know what I'm saying? You need that passion, and it needs to be here in you all the time. How do you get back to it? Just sit down and start writing. Just sit down and start writing. Not if it's good, not if the wind blow. Who gives a shit? Sit down and get writing. Go right back to work. It's a skill. It's some muscles. You develop them by getting back to it. That doesn't mean you immediately get up off the couch and run a marathon after 6 months. It means you start small. It means you just keep writing. You're going to write some garbage until you get the blood flowing again, get the brain fired up again. And you get going and you get moving and you ask for help and you stop asking the same piddly questions over and over, and you really make an effort to push yourself. That's how you keep moving. That's how you keep growing. You have to be challenging yourself. You have to be making an effort past just the, I don't know if it's good stage. Because no one knows if it's good. That's why we make it in the first place. But how do you rekindle your passion? I can't. If you need a human being to come along and constantly rekindle your passion to make art, there's a door, and outside that door there are buildings that can teach you other skills and crafts. You should always be passionate. It should always live in you. You should always be dying to do this shit. Because you can't wait to tell your story because you're the only one who can tell it. That doesn't go anywhere. You might not be interested in doing it because you're tired, because you're stressed, because of this, because of that, and that's fine. That's why we go take breaks. But the passion needs to be living inside you. It needs to be, regularly fueled by you giving a shit. And if it's not, I believe, as the kids still say, GTFO. Do the kids still say that? Kids, do you still say GTFO? Somebody let me know. Somebody out there just, drop me a note. But yeah, the passion's always there. If it ever wanes, you're missing the boat. Great first question. On to the second question. I think there's just two. Yes, there's just two, and then we're getting down to business. How do you overcome the fear of not making good enough pros? I'm going to throw this phone. I'm hurling this phone just into the wall. Just fuck it. It's done. What kind of question is this? It doesn't matter if it's good enough. It's a draft. It doesn't matter if it's good enough. Do you understand? Like, when you were learning how to do literally anything you know how to do now, did it matter that in the course of you learning, you weren't as good at it then as you are now? Did you stop and get real critical about yourself when you were learning how to walk, and in your small toddler mind, get in there and be like, body, I'm not moving that left hip, though, full extension here. I'm not getting a whole lot of tendon movement. What the shit's going on? This sucks. No, you were putting one leg in front of each other. That it's just like, who gives a shit if it's good? It's going to get better. That's why we do more drafts. How is this not clicking? What's missing here? It doesn't have to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect. You chasing perfect is like that other person chasing passion. You're always going to be disappointed. You are always going to play small. You are always going to fail. You get that? Do you understand? It never is going to be perfect. Stop trying to make it perfect. Good enough is bullshit. Oh my God, I'm doing that thing from Voice video. Good enough is bullshit. It doesn't matter. Stop it. Stop it. Just write. Just tell your story. If you're worried about, is it good enough for other people? Fuck them. Make it for you. Fuck them. Make it for you. Do you understand? What's going to get across to you? What's going to click? You're doing this for you. You're doing this to the best of your ability. Always, period. Other people will get on board if you make it clear and you make it accessible and you make it relatable and you make it interesting. If you're failing to do that, GTFO. Try basket weaving. Try automotive repair. Try painting. Try haiku. Try that origami. Try cooking. Try anything. But if you're sitting there constantly measuring your creative output based on whether or not somebody else thinks it's good enough, you will always fail and you will always be disappointed. What you need to do, what you need to know is that you're not good at this. You're not going to ever be perfect at it, but you're going to keep trying. And you will get better from wherever you are at the time. You'll go forward and get better. And if you're in a situation where you're not getting better, go find a different situation where you can be made better. If you hang out with the same 10 people and they're not helping you, why are you hanging out with the same 10 people, man? Fuck them. Let's go. You want to get good at this? Push yourself. It is incredibly frustrating as a coach and an editor to just watch the same people tread water, a fish swimming in a circle over and over again. Why? Why? Because they're too concerned with, is it good enough? Fuck it. Write it down. Write it down. It's not going to be good enough. It's a draft. Maybe it's a first draft. Maybe it's a second draft. Maybe it's a 90th draft. Who cares what number draft it is? But if you work on it, if you develop it, if you push it, if you ask some technical questions and you try to make some answers and you apply some thinking to it, it'll make a difference and it'll get better. But you have to do the work, not the constant hypervigilance of anxiety about questioning. Oh my God, I don't know if it's any good. Fuck it. That's the wrong thing to ask. That's exactly what got you swimming in the circle in the first place. The better questions to ask are, okay, I wrote this. It's all the way written. I think I got it all out of my head. What works and what doesn't? And in terms of works, it's what makes narrative sense. Do things naturally follow a progression, going from point A to point B to point C to point D? Does this make sense? Does this put a picture in your head? Does that put a picture in your head? Does this sound like a person speaking? Does that seem like a thing you can imagine? If you can do those things, it's probably okay. And then you just work on making it better. I don't know what to, I don't know how else to answer your question. Because it's just straightforward like that. And if you don't think you can do it, learn to make soap. Learn how to cook. Get real comfortable with TikTok. I don't know, whatever floats your boat. But if you're going to constantly worry about, I don't know if it's good enough. I don't know what the problem is. This isn't going to work for me. You are always going to fail. I don't care what your aspiration is. I don't care what your plan is long term. I don't care how many days or nights you've stared out the window wishing one day to be an author. You're not going to get there if you sit there and keep wondering, well, I'm only going to write it if it's perfect and good enough. Fuck it. You're not going to get there. Save yourself some issue. Save yourself some trouble. Just get your story out of your head and onto the page, and then make it on the page the best you can make it. And sometimes that's only going to be a certain level of good because either you're unwilling or unable to push yourself any further. Nature of the beast. We're not all going to paint like Caravaggio. You do the best you can with what you have, and you get better over time. And that's what drives you. That's your passion. Not the want of money, because believe me, there are faster ways to get way more money. Not the interest or pats on the head from other people, because you're going to be really unhappy that there's never going to be enough people to pat you on the head. But what you can do is push yourself and challenge yourself and prove to yourself that you can make this thing that started off as brain chemicals and electricity and turned into language, and then all of a sudden put a movie in somebody else's brain. Like, that's magic. Do you understand? That's magic. And every time you detour and start worrying about whether it's good enough or start worrying about whether or not it's perfect, you are fucking ruining the magic. How dare you? How dare you? Don't do that. It's magic. Let it be magic. Make your art. Movie and brains. Let's go. Chop, chop. And that's how we're starting. Oh, man, that's how we're starting. Let's go answer some great, fantastic, killer questions, shall we? Oh, man. Question number 1. Yeah, we're firing on all spicy cylinders tonight. Okay, it's because I had a cheesesteak. It's one of my favorite meals. It was amazing. Let's go. Question number 1. What's the difference between a beta reader and an ARC reader? This is not the first time I've seen this question in the last 3 weeks. This came up a lot. Apparently there was something on Facebook. I keep turning like there's going to be a second mic here. Somebody's going to go, yeah, John, there was totally a thing on Facebook. I don't know. But there was a thing on Facebook that apparently somebody or some group shared or created. And let's lay these things out. A beta reader is a person, okay? They're somebody who reads after everything's all nice, neat, pretty in a row to make sure that their experience more or less describes or develops what the consuming reader experience is going to be. They're the beta test. They check it out before it goes out the door. That's a beta reader. They're not an editor. They're not your agent. They're kind of sort of marketing, but not entirely. They're mostly there to just kind of give you a ballpark bellwether grade as to what kind of exposure or experience you can expect when the book goes out into the real world. That's a beta reader, okay? An ARC, capital A, capital R, capital C, is an acronym. Advanced Reader Copy. It's a physical product. I don't have one here, do I? Hang on, I do have one here. Wait right there. Hang on. ARC. An ARC is a copy of the book in whatever finished state the physical release is going to be, or it could be a digital ARC. But it's the finished copy. It's the thing the consumer will eventually get. Yeah, you might make a couple cover changes. Yeah, there still might need to be some copy edits or proofing that needs to be done. But by and large, you're like 80, 90% complete when it comes to an ARC. Now, one's a person, one's a physical printed book or a digital file or something. Here's where things get a little hinky. Somewhere along the way, and I'm not sure where, people started making a distinction between a beta reader and an ARC reader, as though an ARC reader is something else. And I guess, yes, they're a different person, because maybe a beta reader is reading your Word doc or your Scrivener file or whatever, and your ARC reader is reading your finished, mostly done file. But on that level, the distinction is pretty moot. It's pretty much the same thing. You're just, the difference is in the thing you're handing them, okay? By and large, whenever you're talking about an ARC, you're talking about a physical product, a manufactured thing. And when you're talking about a beta reader, you're talking about a person. Usually the readers of ARCs are reviewers who are looking to generate blog traffic and help generate marketing as well as buzz and hype and all that shit so that you can roll it forward into your sales copy for, let's say, your Amazon page. But the difference is that they're reading for different degrees. An ARC reader is looking at a finished product and drawing a consumer-facing opinion. Hey, here's this new thing. It's out. I'll give it a 6 out of 10, or I'll give it 5 burritos out of 8, or whatever nonsense they're doing, okay? A beta reader is looking to give you a critical impression based on how they thought or felt things went as a reader. One is author-facing, beta reader. One is consumer-facing, ARC reader. That's the big difference. But in terms of the skill they're using, they're both reading. Make sense? Great question. On we go to the next. Question number 2. This is the question that blew up Discord. By the way, if you want to join the Discord, go over there to, where is it? Patreon.com/JohnHelpsYouCreate. $2 a month. Gets it right on the door in the Discord. And then you too can be all aflame when this question goes live. Question number 2. How do I know if I'm trying to write something beyond my skill level? Well, I suppose your DM will tell you that the difficulty challenge, the DC is really high and you got to roll a lot of dice. Beyond that, it's going to come down to the ease and your amount of frustration. So whatever it is, whether it's a scene, whether it's a character, whether it's an arc, whether it's a line of dialogue, you're writing something. Doesn't matter what the thing is, but you're writing. You're trying to write it. The number of times you are delete, and wiping it out and trying something new and then deleting and trying again, and it's not just a matter of like, it doesn't sound right to me, like you're obsessing. You're not obsessing over a single word, but you're just trying to conceptually get this idea out. That's the kind of ease or frustration I'm talking about. How long do you sit there? Yes, audio people, I'm aggressively sitting on camera, trying to like leak fluids from my ears to demonstrate, I'm thinking so hard. And then on top of that, the ease with which you have to articulate your idea. So how hard was it to figure out what the shit you were going to say was? And then how hard was it for you to write it down in a way that made sense? Where the commas went, where the periods went, what were short sentences, what were fragments, what were long, where did the semicolon go? How did you get it across to a reader in a way that makes sense to you and to them? If you're experiencing a lot of difficulty in both those things, hey, guess what? You are writing just outside your skill level. Now, that's not necessarily automatically a bad thing. Here, hang on. Let's be real clear about this. Come here. It's not automatically and desperately a bad thing that you're doing that. It's okay to write just a little bit outside your skill level, just a little bit. You want to kind of grow that comfort zone in increments. So you're going to spend a little bit of time just at the edge, just at the border, that Tijuana of your comfort zone, okay? But if you're regularly taking these big, long, protracted stretches where you're like, John, I'm trying to write, 2 different narrative point of views, and they're in 2 totally different chronologies, and they're in 2 different tenses, and the story's really big and complicated because in my head I imagine this huge Rube Goldberg level of story. And it's my first book, by the way. You might be taking too big a swing because in your head, you're thinking about something that's maybe been influenced by very heavily crafted art, like a television show where the episodes have been edited heavily or scripted over a course of weeks or months, or it's been animated by a number of people, or you're using emotional leverage to sort of assume that what you see in TV in your favorite television show is immediately going to translate into paragraphs. So there's a lot of factors there that might be affecting or corrupting or altering how you're perceiving your skill level. I'm not talking about writing sentences like, see Dick run. Run, Dick, run. Isn't Dick a good runner? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about your ability to take your idea and get it on the page. And if you can do that without too much anxiety, without too much frustration, without too many, stops and starts and rewrites and all this nonsense, your skill level is pretty comfortable. But the minute it starts to jam you up, the minute it starts to be like, I don't know if it's good, I'm all up in my head about it. It's really hard to do. I've tried rewriting this thing 6 times. Chances are, just for this scene, just in this moment, just for this thing, for whatever reason, you're pushing your skill level and you're going too far. It's not bad to do it, but be aware that if you regularly are doing this, scene after scene, concept after concept, thing after thing, you might want to get some help, and you might want to really have a sit-down moment with yourself and go, why am I trying to take this big swing? What am I trying to accomplish? What do I want? Am I looking for validation? Am I looking for praise? Am I just trying to feel good about myself? Do I want somebody to give me like a hug? What's going on? Why am I pushing myself this way? Why do I think the best art is here, way over there, and not here in the present? These are the heavy-duty questions. These are the things you can find out in coaching sessions. These are tough, uncomfortable, sit there with yourself and maybe don't like the answer questions. But if you're regularly and consistently doing that, it's time to ask for help. Every once in a while, it's totally okay to be outside your comfort zone and totally be okay to be outside your skill level, because that's how we grow. That's how we improve. But if you always find yourself there and you're out there without a real sense of tools, like, I'm trying and I'm just kind of slapping the keys like I'm wearing oven mitts and it's just a mess, and you're doing that on purpose, well, then go get some help. If you lack the tools, go get the tools. Good question. Great question. Don't give up. Keep going. On we go to question 3. Question 3. Okay. How do I write a scene where the main character makes an incorrect assumption and the reader knows the truth? And can I explain it both in and out of their POV? I still don't think like that question is very well worded, so let's try coming at it a different way. Most of the time, a lot of writers have this idea, have this thought in their head that a character has to make the right choices and can't make a mistake and has to know things correctly in order to demonstrate quality or goodness or intelligence or awesomeness or whatever. And they don't. That's not a thing. You don't have to do that. That's not a thing. The important part here is that what the reader knows and what the character knows can be, and sometimes should be, two different things. For instance, if the reader, let's say we're in third person. Let's say we are in third person, somewhat omniscient, so we're able to move from position to position, going all around the story wherever we are. If the reader knows what the bad guys are doing, but the main character doesn't know, because that's how, the bad guys were over in chapter 6 and now we're in chapter 7 following the main character, then the reader knows more information than the main character does. And that's fine. That's okay. For some stories, that's the way you make it work. But when it comes time for the reader to make for the character to make a choice, They don't know what happened in chapter 6. They weren't in chapter 6. They just know what they've got from chapter 5, and now they're in chapter 7. When the character doesn't know everything based on who or where they are in the story, you can't have them making decisions like they were just in the they don't have full knowledge, so you can't treat them like they have full knowledge. Whether we're doing it in their point of view or outside their point of view, you can't do that, because the character isn't going to suddenly know more if you're in their point of view or if you're out of their point of view, because it's still a quantity of information. So how do you write a character so that the character makes an incorrect assumption? You write that the character makes the incorrect assumption. They make a mistake. They err. They fuck up, whatever you want to call it. You just write that. You just write the scene. You write the sentences where the character makes a mistake. Now, the reader is going to read that and go, well, shit, now what happens? Which is what you're going for, which is what you want. You want to see that. You want that kind of idea where, do it that way. Why is my thing so, there we go. You want that kind of misalignment between reader and character in those situations, because the reader's going to stick around to figure out how their character is going to get out of this problem. Oh my God, I wanted to yell at the book, hey, don't go in there. That's where the monster is. But now they've done it. It's like yelling at the movie. It's like yelling at the theater. Don't go in there. That's where the killer is. Well, shit. You know more than the character does. So let's have a good time and see how the character gets out of it. You just write it. You just write it. There's nothing special about it. You, the author, know more than all your characters. The reader doesn't need to know as much, but over the course of time, they'll know more and more progressively. But individual characters, they don't have to know everything in order, and they don't have to be perfect, and they don't have to act on everything. So you just have the character do that, whatever it is. That's arguably technically wrong. Just have them do it. Just write it down. Okay? Great question. I hope that made sense. If it doesn't, let me know, and I'll take another stab at it, probably with an example. But let me know if that doesn't work for you. All right. Are there, as I get another mouthful of water, are there any questions from the delightful people in chat? Hello, chat. It's good to see you. Questions, anybody? It's so good to see you. I'm doing well, thank you. I'm doing very well. If you just came in, you missed a fairly spicy opening. But I'm doing well. I took a little bit of a break. It was mostly some good, some bad, but I'm back. And here we are, and it's delightful. And I want to thank everybody. I want to thank all those people on Monday who resubscribed. I really appreciate it. You are literally keeping the lights on and helping me feed myself, so I'm always a big fan. And I am, as always, eternally grateful for everybody for their time, support, attention, and questions. So it's nice to see you all. Thanks for being here. Anybody got anything? I'm doing well. I feel great. I feel amazing. You have a question. I'm ready. Do I see a difference when working with clients who are traditionally published? Hang on, we're going to put that question up. Boom. Do you see a difference when working with clients who are traditionally published versus self-published? Yes. If you're talking, all right, so there's a couple different ways to come at this. If you're talking about manuscript quality, yes. And that's not because of how they were published. It's because of individual writers being different from each other and everybody writing in a different way to a different degree for a different reason, whatever that reason is. But yeah, you can spot the writers who have sort of been swimming in very shallow self-publishing waters because there's less polished craft there. They're new at this. They're anxious about it. They're trying to take bigger, ambitious, artsier swings. And the traditional publishing is generally because they're trying to get into a traditional publishing gatekeeping, jump through the hoop situation. They've played things a bit more by the numbers. They've played things a little bit more safe. And their stories generally tend to move in fairly, not predictable, but organized directions. You don't see the same kind of big swings and artsiness in traditional publishing that you do in self-publishing, because traditional publishing structures, you're writing to the requirements of some publisher. The agent, your pimp, or a publisher wants to see a certain thing, and you've tried to write to that demand. Whereas with self-publishing, you're just crafting whatever the hell, floats your boat. So in addition to seeing like, oh, well, you write one way and that other person writes a different way, and the combination of punctuation and grammar and confidence and motivation and organization and ideas, you take that on top of the idea of like, I'm telling my story my way and everybody else can get the fuck out, versus I'm writing this specific thing because I want to be traditionally published because I have this kind of expectation that I want, and I have this kind of traditional thing this kind of response I'm experiencing, or this kind of thing I want at the end of the day. You do see a difference in product. You do see a difference in discipline. Because I have seen some traditionally published writers who have the discipline of like my cat at 2:00 in the afternoon when it's sunny and it's just kind of like laying there. And I've seen some self-published authors who are so hyper-motivated that they'll outwork me. And they're all up on like, hey, where's my stuff? What are you doing? How's this going? What's the next step? What's the next 5 steps after that? When can I book the next thing? What are the next steps? How can we speed this up? And I love that. That makes me happy. And the balance there is more individual, but in terms of just pure manuscript stuff, which I think is what you might be asking, purely on a manuscript level, aside from story premise and kind of the play out of beats, the procession of story, not really. There's no major difference. It's all in the end still words and punctuation and grammar and structure. It's just a matter of who's trying to accomplish what, say what, and do what. I can tell you that my clients who have been traditionally published already and who have come to me now for their subsequent books, they know what they're getting into. So we can frequently dispense with sort of the baseline stuff. Like I don't need to explain grammar to them. And we can immediately get into like character arc and theme and subtext, the deeper level stuff. Because they've already been published once, so it's not like we're trying to impress anybody. We're just trying to tell the best story we can. In self-publishing, there's, especially if it's your first book, there's a lot of plates in the air. There's a lot of moving parts where we're having discussions about like, here's how you write the thing, and then here's how you make it better, and here's how you handle the marketing, and here's how you wear your publisher hat, and here's where you do this. And there's a lot more to the self-published discussions. I don't know who's happier. I think it comes down to an individual writer question at that point. I can tell you my traditional published clients are successful, more so than my self-published clients, but that's not because of how they have chosen to publish. It's because of the quality of the work they've produced. They stuck with it longer. They worked harder at it. Traditional publishing sort of engenders that kind of concept, because you're always trying to get somebody to pat you on the head and jump through the hoop. Whereas self-publishing can be as simple as, I just wrote a thing and I threw it up on the internet and there it is. Some people do that. But structurally, narratively, conceptually, that's probably the only criteria that can distinguish a traditional publishing experience from a self-publishing experience. Because at the end of the day, it's still writers writing. Amazing question. And it's so good to see you. Thanks for being here. Anybody else? You're very, very welcome. Thank you for that amazing question. Anybody else? Or shall we march on? I think it's time to march on. If you have questions, just fire away in chat. Here we go. Question 4. What do I need to know about writing a main character arc in a thriller? Well, it's a thriller. So there's going to be a few different pieces that are going to exist because it's a thriller, more so than if you were writing a main character arc in, say, a children's book or a young adult fantasy novel. In a thriller, your character arc is generally, not always, generally secondary. It's less important than the plot because thrillers as a genre tend to prioritize the main plot because that's the thing that's thrilling. Will the Russian sub, escape the bottleneck and will they be able to defect? Will, the hero be able to survive Nakatomi Tower? The plot takes front stage because it's able to generate far more thrills in the thriller genre than the character arc. The character arc is often in service of the plot to a degree. So what does in service mean? Just so we're clear on this term. Sometimes when an arc is in service of the plot, the arc plays a fundamental role in resolving plot. So, for instance, if you have a character who needs to believe in themselves, like they're lacking self-confidence, that arc can be in service of the plot if you can resolve the main plot by having the character believe in themselves. For my two favorite examples continue to this day to be, I'm a kid who got picked on, so I learned karate, and then I kicked the blonde kid in the face. I didn't believe in myself, and then I did believe in myself. Or, from One Crazy Summer, I'm a guy who didn't believe in himself and who hated boats, and now all of a sudden, I'm on a boat winning a regatta from the jocks with the rest of my nerd friends, and I have to throw this little ball into a little hoop, and I've never been able to make a basket in the entire movie, and now all of a sudden I can because I believe in myself and I'm good enough. Your arc can be in service to your thriller. It might help make the thriller feel more tense. It might also deflate the thriller a little. It depends on what the plot is. It depends on what the arc is. Usually, though, it's not in service. Usually they're two somewhat separate things. The main plot's going in one way, and by the way, this arc is over here just kind of hanging out off in the margin. And that's fine, because what defines that arc is less development. So you're going to get introduction, you're going to get 1 or 2, maybe 3 instances of development where stuff's going to happen. There's going to be a conflict. There's going to be some resolution as a character tries to grow, change, or develop. And then it gets resolved somewhat independently and usually after, usually after the main plot. So like in Die Hard, which is a thriller, Die Hard's main plot is Bruce Willis defeating Alan Rickman's band of merry burglars and thieves and being able to survive the ho, 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 I have a machine gun, all that stuff, right? That's the main plot. The character arc for John McClane is getting back together with his wife. He gets back together with his wife after he saves the day because, to some degree, he had to save the day first so that he could be alive enough to get back with his wife. They're not entirely working together. They're somewhat concurrent, but he didn't need to get back with his wife in order to save Nakatomi Plaza. He saved Nakatomi Plaza, and then he was able to get back with his wife. That's the difference. Beyond that, it's a simplified arc, and you're going to give it some but not as much attention as you would the main plot. In terms of what distinguishes it, it's still going to get introduced, and it's going to get less development. The skills or challenges in a character arc in a thriller are often not the skills necessary for resolving the main plot. So in, say, The Bourne Identity, where the main character's arc is to somewhat regain his identity and uncover the reality from amnesia, but it's also to survive the Treadstone assassins and, sort of like fight back and basically be left alone. His amnesia doesn't entirely resolve Treadstone for him. Just because he remembers doesn't help him kill any better. I mean, it does initially, but after a while he just remembers shit and then off he goes. So you want to make sure that your arc is somewhat distinct from the plot of your primary driving plot in your thriller. And keep it shorter. Keep it shorter. It doesn't need to be as big because you don't want to really pull that much focus away from the thriller, or at least the main plot. Great question. Loved it. What's next? Question number 5. This is a great question. Talk about any bad writer habit that I've seen lately. Oh boy. Okay. Fun story time with John. I wish I had like a fun story here. Hang on, do I? Yes. Fun story time with John sound effect. Here we go. There's been, from what I've seen, a really bad writer habit lately of trying to overcomplicate your story for the purpose of making it more viable to a reader. Here's what I mean. If you're wondering what the hell I just said, here's what I mean. So let's say you're writing a fantasy novel. Sure. And in your fantasy novel, you have a couple characters, and they're somewhat archetypal. You've got the serious one and the nerdy one and the fun drunk and the aggressive one, and all the usual players are there. But you also realize that in the course of your story that you might want to appeal to horror readers. Because you like horror, and you would have written a horror book, but you started writing this fantasy one and it sort of took off sooner. But you like horror, you enjoy horror, you talk to people who like horror, you realize that horror is a viable thing. So maybe all of a sudden you decide you want to create a couple conflict action beats that are horror-centric. You don't necessarily write them expressly as horror beats, but they contain horror elements. Maybe you put some zombies in a mine. Maybe you have them stalked by a scary werewolf. I don't know. But you craft these elements that don't normally and wouldn't otherwise go with what you're writing. You just kind of squeeze them in there, shoehorn them in, because you want to make sure you're appealing to people. Oh, I better have a character that, it's real sarcastic, because that's still really popular for some Unknown reason. So I better have a character that's really just cracking wise all the time, a real smart ass. Oh, I'm an American, but I better start using a couple Britishisms just to make sure everybody knows that I'm well cultured. I better have some character, especially my elves, start using the word bloody or maybe the word arse. But that's not part of my normal vernacular when I write or communicate with others. But here we are doing it anyway. Because I want to give the appearance, I want to give the impression, I want to present some bullshit to other people. It's no different. It's no different than going back and trying to chase those trends. Remember when zombies were a real big thing and all of a sudden everybody wrote a zombie story? Or when paranormal romance was a thing and everybody wanted to fuck a ghost? Remember those days? I do. I edited some of those books. It was an experience. Those efforts to try and appeal broadly just for the sake of broad appeal rather than crafting your best work and knowing that the quality of your work by itself will appeal to people independent of the elements it contains. You don't have to write horror things to appeal to a horror reader. You could just write a real good fantasy novel and a horror reader will still read it. People are not as bound to genre conventions as we may assume. Some people are, but whatever. They're they're a minority, and we don't need to pander to them. We're just trying to write a book that anybody would like. From grandma to Joe across the street to Tommy down the way to 5 people you don't know yet. That really bad writer habit of trying to just make sure we tick enough boxes so that we tick enough people, potential consumers, sucks. It sucks. You don't need to. You don't gain anything. It doesn't suddenly become better. But it's what people are doing again. It seems to be, from what I've seen, it seems to be somewhat tied to the idea of sort of confidence in writing, not just on an individual level, but a collective thing. As we sort of move through tough times socially, writers who've always sort of been a barometer, along with painters and sex workers, always sort of a barometer of how the culture is going, they get real anxious, real nervous, real skittish when things go bleak, when things look bad. It's the writers and the painters and the sex workers who have to interact and interface with people and try to verbalize and shape emotion outward for others that allows them to feel those things most sensitively. And that's where we can lead into all these different sort of habits of like hyper micromanagement or desperate I don't know-ism that leads to a million things being shoveled into stories. It's a terrible habit. How you defeat it, you just make the best work you can based on what it was you were writing. Don't go out of your way to suddenly insert other genre and other genre elements. Tell the best, whatever story it is, you can. And that's going to be more than good enough. It will still appeal to people no matter what. Okay? That's the bad writer habit. And you can all do better. Question 6. It's a spicy question. As I look at it now, like my answer is going to be spicy, but it's gentle. So I have to find like gentle spice. Here we go. Gentle advice. Question 6. What am I supposed to do if I don't query and don't seek representation? Publish the book. You don't have to get a pimp. You don't need representation. It's not a prerequisite for publishing. You can take your book. You can, go through the steps and get other people around to help you produce it. You don't need to go down that road for publication. That road has certain things, it has access to this and access to that might be harder to negotiate or navigate if you're going self-publishing. But you can still do it. That doesn't prohibit you or prevent you from being published. You don't need an agent. Now, I understand. I understand agents are this big deal. You talk to them on Twitter, you see them, they're talking about how great their clients are. It feels like you don't want to miss out. You feel like you want to be part of the in group, and you want to be just like those other writers, 1, 2, and 3, who you think are the bee's knees, and you want to be just like them because you want some success like they had. Except a lot of those writers, 1, 2, and 3, they came up in a different era than you did, when there was more money or a different approach to things. It's no longer the be-all, end-all. It's no longer the perfect solution for everybody. But for some reason, we've decided that these middle persons, these pimps, these exploiters of labor are still like ticks on a dog, required to be there. You're not a real writer without one. Get fucked. What makes you a real writer is that you really wrote. All that agent is doing, other than pimping out your shit, is taking a cut of your profit from your work and opening a few doors to you that maybe you didn't want to open in the first place. Yeah, they'll put a different set of eyes on your work, but at the end of the day, you still got to go straight to the consumer. Like, it's an extra step. If you don't query and you don't seek representation, you can still publish the book. And it's just as legit. It's just as viable. If I lined up a self-published book and a traditionally printed book next to each other side by side, I don't think the majority of people would know what to look for in order to be able to tell the difference. And even if they did know the level of quality and physical manufacture at this point, I think the two are pretty indistinguishable. And on a digital level, you can't tell. So there's no longer a great chasm between the two, unless it is the author themselves who inserts or perpetuates that chasm. But I don't understand why you'd want to bring somebody else into the process. They're not your friend. They're cheerleading you entirely for their own benefit. They need you to do well because, like a parasite, they don't feed unless you do well. So they're incentivized to make sure you do well, but they're in the way. You can go straight to the consumer. I wouldn't make a big deal about this. You can still publish. It's not the end of the world. You might even do better. But maybe. Yeah, here it is. Maybe you're worried about, like, well, how are people going to see my book? How am I supposed to get in bookstores? How am I supposed to get this marketing thing? Hey, who do you think does the marketing anymore? It ain't the agent. Who goes to a bookstore anymore when the majority of books are sold digitally? I understand you've got maybe some nostalgia, some emotional tying to the idea of, like, I have to hold a physical copy of my book. You can get your own book copied on demand. Like, you can print your own shit, and it can be just as fine. You can hold that book, and it's just as legit as you let it be. One of the big obstacles people face when they talk about querying and rejection over and over and over again is the amount of time. We don't know how long it's going to take. That struggle, however long it is, doesn't make the book more valuable. Like, if you get rejected 100 times, that does not mean the book is 100 times better than a book that's been rejected once. It's not that at all. It doesn't matter more just because you struggled more. Do you understand that? That's the capitalism in you talking. Your work and your effort was as valid before you decided to do this as it was while you were doing it. Because the hard work was the writing. You can go straight to the consumer. Because that's ultimately where your book's going to go anyway, right? You didn't just write this book so that somebody in some fucking office with their shirt tucked in would say, "Good job, you." No, you wrote this book so that you could sell a couple copies of this book. Well, you can still go do that. Nothing's stopping you. Except this strange, arbitrary route that you decided needed to be there for whatever reason you decided you needed to do it. But you don't need to query, and you don't need representation. Think it over. consider that it's not the only one. There's no one true way to do it. There's many ways to accomplish the goal you have. Are there any other questions from anybody in chat? While I quickly skim social media and my inbox, because apparently more questions came in. Let's see. Yes, I'm drinking water. I love that one of you emailed me that to make sure I was doing it. Yes, I'm drinking water. I've been drinking water all day. Questions? Anybody? I know what lampshade hanging in, but what is a reverse lampshade? Well, shit. Now you're going to... reverse lampshade. Okay. That's a great question. I haven't heard that term in, like, ages. It's also not a term that really, like, matters. How do I explain this? It's a lampshade that's done in a different order than normal. That's probably the easiest way to describe it. Hang on. So, you know what I blame for this discussion? Because this just irritates me. You know what I blame for this? I blame all the TV tropes fucking nonsense. Because what it did is it drove an awful lot of people to give a shit about labeling things rather than understanding what it was that they were labeling. No, okay. I don't know how to tell you this. I love you dearly, but no one gives a fuck about lampshading. Well, social media does, but who gives a fuck about them? A reverse lampshade is lampshade hanging at the start that goes and gets removed, if that makes sense in the metaphor. The other way to resolve that issue is just to write a clearer scene. But even as far as tropes go, they're not the end of the world for it to exist. Because it doesn't matter what the thing what is a lampshade. See, this is the discussion that comes up because all of a sudden these fucking terms get bandied around. A lampshade is the idea, much like gilding the lily. It's the idea that you are calling attention to a trope and then using it in exactly the way the trope is. Now, I'm sure that definition is wrong because that definition seems to change every time somebody changes their socks. Is it something to really worry about? No. But a reverse lampshade is a thing that is lampshaded initially that goes and gets unlampshaded over time. You know how in cartoons, when Bugs Bunny has to hide from somebody, sometimes he sneaks into Elmer Fudd's house and disguises himself as a lamp by putting a lampshade on? Or whenever somebody tells a joke about a party and they want to demonstrate just how crazy and wild somebody is, so they put a lampshade on their head? You know that nonsense? That's where the term comes from. Does it serve an actual beneficial part of the writing process? No. Does it give you and your friends a fun thing to talk about on social media? You betcha. But it doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything. Good question. I'm happy to talk about it. It just sucks. Not the question, the concept, which is not your fault. I don't blame you at all. You asked a good question. You're very welcome. Thank you. Oh, fucking tropes. Well, they're not automatically bad. That's the thing of it, right? Everybody's like, oh my God, a trope. Run. And it's just a thing. It's just a term. If you leave it as is, if you leave it unchallenged, if you leave it unchecked, and you're just like, boom, here's this boring stock default thing. Yeah, it can really be an impediment to your story. It can be really dull. It can feel really out of place. But if you take that same idea, whatever it is, I don't care, name a cliche, name a trope, whatever it is, and you start to tailor it, you adjust it to your story. Maybe you play around with it. All of a sudden you turn it into like, you flip some genders around, or you change some dynamics in it. You know, you turn the poor little orphan girl who gets whisked away to the upper class, and you suddenly make it, about race rather than class. You start telling that Jamie Foxx version of Annie that wasn't any good, because fundamentally that story is racist, which is part of the problem, and it's part of what makes the cliche the cliche. The idea primarily is, when you have a trope, doesn't matter what trope it is, the less you do to modify it, the greater the potential for weakness it provides to your story. It's an anchor. It can drag you down. But if you tailor it, if you tweak it, if you poke it with a few sticks and you make it your own, it can go from being a real detriment to a real asset. Because all of a sudden, once you start tailoring it, it really demonstrates like, oh shit, this author knows what the fuck they're doing. They've seen this trope and they're challenging it. They're subverting it. They're making something of it. They've got something to say. All because instead of using a boring stock default part, you did something to it. You made some decisions. That's what annoys me about trope discussions. Because that's where the focus should be. It should be not just recognizing the trope like, oh my God, a trope. Oh my God, a trope. Oh my God, a trope. And then stopping there. We're not going whale watching on the coast. It's, okay, there's the thing. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to put it in your work? If you are, how are you going to affect it? How are you going to change it? How are you going to develop it? Or are you not going to use it at all? Are you just going to boot it to the curb with those 2 other scenes you're deleting? Which is fine. You can do that too. But do something with it. Don't just stop and point at it. Because it doesn't... oh my God, an ad... We don't do that for oh my God, a noun. Hey, look, a comma. Okay, great. I spotted the comma too. Good job, us. But how does it make our story better? How does it help us become a better writer? How does it help us craft our story? How does this teach us something? There is my short rant. No rant. I should ring. Well, it's a little late to ring the rant bell. So have a party horn. That's a reverse lampshade. All right, hang on. Okay, look. See this? See this? Look. There you go. When you encounter somebody saying, that's a reverse lampshade, I want you to think about this face. Okay, podcast people, I'm rolling my eyes on camera. Just imagine that face. Imagine rolling your eyes. Imagine rolling your eyes so hard you will sprain whatever muscles keep your eyeballs in the sockets. All right? Don't overthink anything. Just tell the best story you can. The other fun fact with this is that people can't agree on what a lampshade is. The people can barely agree on what a trope is by definition. That's why TV Tropes has a 45 trillion individual breakdowns. Because the whole point of TV Tropes is to keep you on the website, and keep you clicking things, and keep you reading. It is not designed to actually benefit you in a tangible, marketable way. It's just there, much like any platform. It's there to keep you on the platform. Don't get lost in the sauce. All right, on we go. Question 7. How much is really different between enemies to lovers and friends to lovers? 2 things. And not just the word enemy and not just the word friend. So there are 2 major concepts that just... All right, so if you don't know what any of these things are, they're primary elements inside romantic arcs, whether they're plots or subplots, whatever. Whether you find them in romance novels, whether you find them as B-plots, whether you find them in erotica, they're usually frequent inside intra-character, multiple character relationships. Enemies to lovers, they say they are exactly what the labels are. Enemies to lovers start off with a number of people. Usually it's 2. People get real skittish when they're trying to write different romantic geometries with polycules and things. But usually it's 2, but you can do it with whatever. Where the number of people, and if you've got a large group, it's the majority of people, but you almost always want to break it down on a binary because eventually you have to write one character with somebody else. Where they start off as enemies. Now, whatever you can define enemies to be, whether that's heated rivals or whether that's something as profound as like Montagues versus Capulets, or whether that's, two warring clans, or whether that's just two people who dislike each other at work, enemies. They have some kind of antipathy between the two of them, and it's established early in the story. And then over the course of the story, because of other factors, they transition from being enemies to being intimate partners or lovers. Generally, the progression there passes, at least if we're talking about erotica and romance, you're talking about angry sex. You're talking about more aggressive expressions of physical intimacy the deeper you get into that book. Because I hate you, but I will totally have sex with you. And if you just were like, ew, that's gross. Yep, that's one of the major downsides with enemies to lovers. It's also one of the downsides with friends to lovers. There's a sort of implication that there has to be some kind of extra dimension to the relationship development. Like somehow hating you makes the sex better, which has not been my experience, but I also did a lot of drugs, so what do I know? But that's enemies to lovers. Friends to lovers, the other side over here, is, well, it's kind of different. It's the idea that we're two people. And we were friends, and now, because of circumstance, we've become lovers. Now, whether that friend is, and I'm so sorry, but I'm going to use this term because it's the clearest, the friend zone. Whether it's the friend zone, or whether it's just two people who know each other and who haven't hooked up, and now they're finally hooking up, and here they are, it's fine. The difference between the two are the start states. That's issue number one. Enemies to lovers suggests a level of disconnection between the two parties, or the three parties, or the five parties, however many people. There is inherent disconnection, not based on the greater picture, not just, well, I'm a Montague and they're a Capulet, but specific to the persons involved. They don't mesh well. A doesn't like B, nor does C like E, or Q like A, or whatever permutation of whatever it is. The two people don't like each other for individual reasons. And then over time, those reasons collapse, and plot and circumstance allows for things to change. And the next thing you know, everybody's taking off their pants together. In friends to lover, you get the same kind of disconnection, but now instead of a mutual agreed upon dislike, now there's what's called an underlying suspense question of, hey, why didn't we get together before? I like you, you like me, let's lose some pants and go. With enemies to lover, the circumstance creates disconnection. I don't like you because reason. With friends to lovers, it's the external circumstance, whatever it was the reason why we didn't get together. But now that reason is gone, so now we can get together. Those are the big reasons. Those are the big differences. That's about it. Other than that, you're eventually still going to get the same people together. Friends to lovers doesn't necessarily carry the same aggression expectation. You're not going to have angry sex with friends to lovers. Maybe, but it's usually more frequently seen in enemies to lovers because you're angry and you're doing something about it with the power of your genitals. Whereas friends to lovers generally considered more kind because I'm your friend. But that doesn't have to be the case. But those are the primary differences. Everything else is a tailored bell and whistle on the part of the author. Great question. Love a good romance question. I'm going to go to question 8. Oh, man, another spicy one? Question 8. Why do I think writers are so concerned about copyright law when they haven't even finished their draft yet? Okay, look. I'll tell you exactly why they give a shit about copyright law. Because worrying about anything else that isn't their draft is a lot more comforting than sitting there worrying about their draft. There's nothing specific in copyright law that leads this to be a problem. You know, they're worried about, I don't know, people ripping them off, hoo-hoo, or they're worried about some kind of weird, strange lawsuit or you know, problem because, oh my God, my character had a Coke, which is not a problem. But a lot of times, especially with new writers, especially trying to get closer and closer to your finished first draft or a point where they think they could be publishing, they will find every reason under the sun to not work on the draft. This isn't exclusive to copyright law. You'll see this with writers who suddenly become very concerned about their social media or their book cover or the critique group or setting up a Discord or a newsletter, or all of a sudden this is the weekend they decided to paint all the trim in their house. They will find a reason to avoid working on the thing that scares them. They will find a reason to keep that going because it's comfortable to keep it going, and to have that not be a thing anymore is scary and new. So since we tend to avoid the things that are scary and new, we suddenly become very concerned with the rigors of the law. But by and large, at the end of the day, it's just a dodge. The times where it is legitimately beneficial for a writer to know copyright law are far less frequent than social media would have you believe. Surprise, surprise. It's just a way to avoid work. That's what I think. Next question. How do I curb Question 9. How do I curb excessive exclamation point use? I feel like I should have put some exclamation points in this question. I think that would, really sell the point. Okay, first of all, there's one answer you're not going to like, which is stop pressing the keys on the keyboard. 2, you can curb excessive exclamation point use by learning what the exclamation point is for. So, what's the exclamation point for? It's for really loud verbal expressions where the sound, whatever it is, needs to be broadcast at length and distance for a number of listeners. It's a shout. It's a yell. It's projected. If your characters are always doing that, or very frequently doing that, because you're trying to use the exclamation point to suggest intensity, like, yeah, or something equally cartoony, what you're counting on there is the exclamation point itself, the literal punctuation mark, to do a lot of the emotional delivery and a lot of the conveying of the idea of how the text should be read. It doesn't matter what the context is. You're waiting on that vertical line with a dot underneath it to tell the reader, hey, no matter what, this dominates how I want you to hear this. That's the problem. You've become reliant on the punctuation to determine for the reader how they should hear, imagine, whatever you want to call it, the text. And if you are constantly coming back to that, the greater question should be, why do you think everything needs to be shouted at a loud volume? Or why are you always having to manufacture intensity? Would you like a better example? Here, hang on. Let's give this a try. I've always wanted to do this. Okay, so right now you can't hear me. I'm not even on the screen right now. But this is the sort of thing that happens every time you use an exclamation point. I'm very far away from the microphone. I don't know how this sounds. But that's an exclamation point. That's what we're going for. So every time you have an exclamation point, I want you to imagine me halfway across the room yelling at a distance into the microphone. Because that's what you're trying to convey to the reader. So how do you curb it? 1, stop pressing the key so many goddamn times. And 2, think about what it is you're trying to convey by using it. And what other tools, what other words, what other punctuation, what other sentence structure, what other story structure, what other context can you give the reader so that they understand more than just waiting on that one vertical line with the dot to do all the meaning you need? Great question. And back to chat we go while I knock off a glass of water. Everybody good? We okay? You guys got very quiet. Did I blow out your eardrums with the yelling? I should have lowered the mic. One of the interesting things to think about is I was shouting at you. One of the interesting things to think about, go look at your text messages. Outside of real hyperbole, are you using a lot of exclamation points? Or are you just writing phrasing? Are you just putting out words? Maybe you throw a comma in there. Maybe you're like me and you like write out the sentences because you think your English teacher will appear from middle school and yell at you. Be aware. You're painting your upstairs instead of writing your first draft. Hey. That first draft isn't going to write itself. I love you. Why aren't you writing your first draft? I understand that once you started painting, you got to keep painting. I get it. I know. I've got to paint a wall in another room. The can of paint is sitting there. I know. I'm going to get to it probably this week. Next week, because I got to finish some recordings first and some edits. But I get it. But come on. It's your first draft. How are you going to get to a second draft without your first draft being done? Come on. Finish painting. Back to work. You're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. Okay? Questions, or shall we head on to the next set? The home stretch. Where I swear to you there are other spicy questions. I know there are. It's by design. While you do that, I'm going to quick check social media to make sure, I don't see anything here. Let's see. Got that done. Got that. Oh, my God. You ready for more spice? I say that every time I have Mexican food. Let's go. All right. I'm not seeing any. All right, let's do it. Here we go. The spice must flow. That is true. Oh, here we go. Fire up the spice machines. Question number 10, how much writing comes from suffering? This is a legitimate course of understanding writing theory. There is a whole school of thought that says that all your writing, at least your creative stuff, comes from a point of suffering, comes from understanding suffering, comes from a position of suffering. I used to be a member of this school of thought. And when I talk about suffering, we're not talking like self-harm. We're talking like the greater Buddhist level of suffering, where all things are in a state of existential decay, where things are suckier more than they're perfect. Broad umbrella suffering, okay? How much writing comes from suffering? Some. Less than the school of thought. All right, so when I learned about this, it was the 90s. I had a mullet. I was mopey. I was about 200 pounds heavier than I am now. I was unpleasant. I was desperate to have human beings pay attention to me. And when I was told by a professor I respected that the cause of creative art, the cause of producing good things into this world that other people will enjoy is that you must suffer. I looked at my lonely, unsatisfying, frequently, uncomfortable life, because being a big guy, life was pretty uncomfortable, not only for the fat shaming of it, but also just the general discomfort in moving and walking and the sense of unattractiveness. I was ostracized. And it was just uncomfortable and unpleasant. I didn't know what the hell I was doing with my life. Thank God drugs made me skinnier. But by and large, this idea was appealing when I was in some kind of really dark, heavy headspace where my life was packed with things that sucked. So it made sense that my greatest creativity came from that sucking. And it wasn't that my life sucking made my art better. It's that, hey, my life sucked and I needed something to do while it sucked. So I just made some art. I just wrote some stories. And shockingly, surprisingly, writing those stories was fun, and it made my life suck a little less. But I attributed my life being painful, uncomfortable, unsatisfying, not very sexy, not very pleasant, not very goofy. There were not a lot of like party horns or anything. No air horns. It was just kind of ugh. I assumed that in order for my art to be good, I had to suffer, which is nonsense because that's not that far removed from in order to be an artist, I must starve. And I don't just mean like not consume food. I mean willingly deprive myself of material to allow myself a more full life. And that's just wrong. It's just wrong. It's an immature way to view the world. It's a very petulant, childish way to view things because suffering is going to happen even when the writing's going well, and suffering is going to happen even when the writing doesn't happen because life has some ups and downs. In part, that's because of capitalism, comrades, and in part, that's just because life's hard sometimes, because existence is hard sometimes, because science and physics and finances and we still have all these dumb beliefs like money matters and borders matter and shit. So suffering is independent from our creativity, and we don't need suffering to fuel our creativity. We can use that suffering to inspire our creativity. We can look at, oh shit, look how messed up this world is. I can say something about it. I can look at my life and go, I can write a character who lives this way because I live this way. I can use the suffering as a starting point, but it need not be a fuel. And because it's not a fuel, the tank isn't going to run out and then I have to go suffer more so my tank refills so I can write more. No, don't do that. What the suffering gives you, whether we're talking about existential, financial, personal, sexual, identity, gender, whatever kind of suffering you want to talk about, what that gives you is a passport, the ability to lens and understand, and your art becomes the medium for your expression of it. I can put words to the idea that I had to choose whether the cat gets fed or I get fed. I can put words to the idea of watching everybody else around me succeed when all I seem to do is want to fail. I can put words to the idea of throwing a million things out there, hoping one of them catches, notice none of them catching, and then watching 5 other people do similar ideas and they all succeed. I can put words to these feelings for good or for ill, for harm or for healing, whatever. But in terms of quantifying how much writing by default comes from suffering, you can't and you shouldn't try. Suffering is a thing that exists in tandem, concurrent, simultaneous to writing. But you can write in the absence of suffering, and you can suffer in the absence of writing. But it does not fuel it. It just gives you a thing to think about. It's a deep question. That's one of those questions where we should have some edibles and a root beer and just like hang out and give it a shot. This was not really a great chat question, but we took a shot at it. On we go. Question 11. What's an alternative to a happily ever after? Do we know what a happily ever after is? Let's define that term just in case. A happily ever after is usually, but not always, it's a big deal in romance novels, but it's usually found in any what's called positive fiction. Positive fiction is young adult, early reader, young adult, some new adult, some adult, where everything ends well for your characters. Oh, golly gee, they get what they want. Not only do they resolve the plot positively, but they resolve the plot positively and get additional extra benefits. Oh my God, we won the thing. We won the event. I can't think of the thing. I totally drew a blank there. We won the thing and we got an extra money and we got this, that, and the other thing. Everything's coming up Milhouse for us now. That's a happily ever after. Some people, we call them idiots, think that a romance novel in particular must have a happily ever after. We won the karate tournament. All right, let's use that. We won the karate tournament. And so that would just be a satisfying ending, right? But now we can expand. To turn it into a happily ever after, we got to add extra layers of happy. So it's, we won the karate tournament and a guy from Nike was in the stands and he wants to offer us a shoe deal. And this one celebrity watched us on TV and they want to hire us to put us in her new video. And I found my keys to the new sports car. And it turns out that my grandpa didn't die in the last chapter. We just keep stacking these ridiculous successes. Because we can't possibly have any bad things happen. The characters are winning. That's a happily ever after. The short version is, and it all ended happily ever, and they lived happily ever after. That's where it comes from. Some people, fools, think that your romance novel has to have that. This is an unrealistic expectation. Because you don't. Because the vast majority of stories do not have a happily ever after, but are still satisfying. We can still win the karate tournament, but not get the shoe deal and not, get $50,000 and not end up in the Rock video and have grandpa still alive. Sometimes winning the karate tournament's just enough, right? An alternative to a happily ever after is called a satisfying ever after, where we just resolve the plot and then move on with our day. Or an unhappily ever after. This one doesn't happen so much because this one requires a little bit of planning, but it's basically the opposite of a happily ever after. And it's super useful when you're trying to show that a character and their arc resolves, but they end up worse off at the end of the book than the beginning of the book. For example, oh man, Harrison Ford totally got frozen in carbonite. And I lost a hand because I'm whiny Luke Skywalker. And, the cool British actor is now like a super force ghost. And I'm stuck in this big, weird, strange, like early 80s bathrobe. And it's kind of drab. And for some reason, Lando is wearing Han's clothes. Everything looks bleak for our heroes. Now imagine that. Expanded. Remember how we expanded the happily ever after? Now we're going to expand the unhappily ever after. Oh, and by the way, taxes are due. Oh, and by the way, I don't have any clean socks. We're just manufacturing more negatives. They're not the end of the world, but we're certainly stacking problems up. There are loads of alternatives to happily ever after, but 9 times out of 10, you could just have a satisfying ending and call it a day, even in a romance novel. Even in your early reader book, even in your new adult, sort of kind of romancy novel. Happily ever after is one choice of many, one option for how you wrap a story up. Okay? Are they good? They can be, but they can also be incredibly hyperbolic and incredibly convenient. Use them sparingly. And now, What time is it? Whew, okay. This one's so big, I'm going to have a couple mouthfuls of tea first because we're going to get into this. Gentle advice. Question 12. If it takes 2 to 3 books to really find my voice, and this first book I've got has taken me 3 years to write, are you saying it'll be a decade before I'm really good at this? Oh, well. Look. Come here. Come here. No. That's not what I'm saying. You've made some big assumptions here. You've made some real big assumptions here. First of all, you've assumed that every book is going to take you the same amount of time to write. You have no evidence to prove that. You've also suggested, because every book is going to take you the same amount of time to write, that you're not going to get better at writing books. That's just stupid. Like, that's just wrong. I can't say for certain that it'll take 2 to 3 books to find your voice, because it might take 10. It might take 1. We don't know. Like we talked about on Monday night, which is available over there on the YouTube channel. Like we talked about, you find your voice by crafting your words and broadcasting them as clearly as possible to the best of your ability, right? How well you do that takes time, and you will over time do better at it the more frequently you do it. Remember how when you were like, I don't know, half the age you are right now, you didn't communicate as effectively as you do right now? Why do you think that is? You got older, you had more experiences, and you practiced communicating. So, issue number 1 I have in this question is, why are you assuming it's going to take you the same amount of time to write every book? And why do you assume you're not going to get, better at it as you go? Issue number 2, though, is what's the hurry? Why are we racing? Why do we care about how long it takes? Unless you're entirely confusing the idea of success with quality writing. And here's where we're going to take a slight detour away from gentle advice over to here to what we will refer to as, the woodshed, where you and I will step behind it and unfuck this problem together. Because your success as an author must be broken down beyond the idea of financial acclaim or recognition. Because those are just sort of like the consequences of good effort. You get paid because you made a thing that somebody bought. You didn't get paid because it was good. You got paid because somebody bought the book. And that's different. That's different from the labor you put into crafting it. Let's use a non-writing example to illustrate this. You ever go to like a farmer's market, or you ever see some food that a human being made, and then not like fast food, although you could argue that fast food falls victim to this too. I'm thinking specifically of like somebody makes a pie or cookies, and they're selling them at a bake sale or a church event or a social event of some kind for like $5 or whatever. And then you buy that pie. Were they successful at the pie because you bought it? Or were they successful with the pie because they made a thing that turned into a pie? That's the distinction I'm talking about here. I know the question's about voice, but the question isn't really about voice. The question is really about your determination of success. because we can replace voice with character structure or outlining or any number of other writer things. What we're talking about is how you're defining success, because clearly you're impatient about it because you're wondering how long it's going to take. No one gives a shit how long it's going to take. Lots of factors go into that. One of them being whether or not you are, for instance, painting your upstairs instead of writing your first draft. Or whether you are rewriting your fifth draft for like the 10th time. Loads of different factors go into this. But come back to the person with the pie at the bake sale. When were they successful? First of all, it's not your job to determine their success. So let's pretend for a minute that we made the pie. Were we successful when we produced the pie and it came out of the oven and it looked like a pie? Or were we successful with the pie when the pie we made, that we worked on, however hard we worked on it, got sold? If the pie didn't sell, does that mean it's not a pie? Does that mean that it suddenly like disintegrates its pie-ness and suddenly becomes like sludge? Like it suddenly evaporates or something? No, it's still a pie. Just like when you write a book. It's a book, whether you sell it or whether you just finished it. And it's up to you to determine what it is you want to do with it. So remember the pie when you start sweating. How long is this going to take? I don't know. It's going to take as long as it takes. It depends on how frequently you write. Depends on how rigorously you revise. It depends on how serious you are with your craft. Like if you just want to slap something together and not make a whole lot of modifications, you could slap it up and get it done in a weekend if you really sat down and did it, right? Drink like 6 or 7 Red Bulls, risk a heart arrhythmia, but you could knock that shit out, couldn't you? If you gave up this and you gave up that and you just kind of motored through it, you could do it, right? It wouldn't be any good, but you could do it. You wouldn't get the result you wanted, though, would you? When we talk about voice, when we talk about how long it's taken to make this thing, you have somehow tied the idea of how long it's taken you with how good you are at it. And the two things do not match. They don't go together. That's important, and we're going to talk about it right now as my hair goes. Hang on, that's better. Look, you're not a better writer just because it took you less time than someone else to write the thing. Because even if you're both writing, let's say 80,000 words, okay? Or 100,000 words. Word count doesn't matter, but let's say you get you and somebody else, and you're writing 2 things of the same size. Hell, let's go one step further. 2 things of the same size in the same genre. Okay? Because of who you are and because of who they are, because of the words you're choosing and because of the words they're choosing, because of how you produce the thing and because of how they produce the thing, you're going to end up with 2 different things. And that's going to take 2 different amounts of time to deal with. Some of that's going to be in your control. Some of that's not under your control, okay? But none of that is any kind of, like, proof of hierarchy. If this person finishes first, that does not mean they wrote a better book than you did. All it means is they finished first. They're not going to get a bigger advance if they traditionally publish. They're not automatically going to get more sales. I mean, they might get sales sooner than you because they finished sooner than you. But overall, in the big grand scheme of things, there is no guarantee that finishing first awards them a bigger share of anything. Unless you're saying that all that success, all those markers of success are finite. And whoever gets there first gets to collect more of them than somebody else. And by the time it's your turn, there won't be any. But that's nonsense. Because I don't know if you know this, but readers have whole shelves full of books to be read. I don't know if they'll read them, but they certainly own them. But that has nothing to do with your success. It has nothing to do with your success. This isn't a race like that. You're not hurrying before it runs out at the store. This isn't like a strange Black Friday or Christmas event where there's a limited number of successful things. And it doesn't matter if somebody did it first or before you. What matters is, did you do it? And how well you did it. That's the important thing here. What your voice does, and the clarity of that voice and the strength of that voice, does not automatically mean you're going to have an easier time getting published. But it will mean that the strength of your voice gives you an easier chance, an easier opportunity for readers to grab onto it. They'll feel like you're speaking more to them. You'll feel more relatable. So they won't have to work as hard, the readers, won't have to work as hard to stay engaged with the story. But even then, that doesn't mean you're going to sell more. Even then, that doesn't mean you're going to get a bigger advance. Even then, that doesn't mean you're going to have long careers ahead of you. It just means that in this story, the way it's written, just this one thing, you've connected with the reader sooner maybe than somebody else. Again, not a race. There's no genital waving or certificate or reward for being able to say, like, well, I engaged my reader on page 2. How about you, Tom? And Tom goes, I engaged him on page 9. You're not a better writer. You're just a different writer. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Not a thing. The other factor here is, short of situations where you have a great number of external pressures on you, like terminal illness, social pressure, personal pressure, financial pressure to expedite your journey creatively. You're going to get your book out before you die. You need to make money on this so that you can, pay for your house. You need to, as Kanye said, get a beat off and get off this damn couch. There's some kind of pressure behind you to do something about it. Short of those situations, time is relatively immaterial. Some people hear that and go, but John, I want to be able to enjoy the fruits of my success. Hey, we live in a capitalist society, comrade. Like, the window for enjoying the fruit of your success seems to be roughly limited to however much time your employer allows you for a lunch break. So that argument doesn't hold a whole lot of water. I know an awful lot of retired people who now in their 60s, 70s, and 80s are absolutely exhausted by their life, and they don't really get a chance to enjoy anything because they're just trying not to die. But why are we racing? There's no bigger reward. Maybe then what you're racing toward is the validation or pride you're already denying yourself. I'm going to finish this book and it's going to feel good. And I'm going to say, yeah, I did it. I finished this book. It's a big deal. And it's only okay if I finish it. It's not okay if I don't. There's something bad or wrong with me if I don't finish. There's something bad or wrong with me if it takes too long. I don't know who decided that for you. I don't want you to keep carrying that. That's not healthy. Stop that. Don't do that. The issue is that you're allowed to be proud of your work at every stage. No matter what you're doing, no matter how far you are. You can be real proud. Holy shit, you guys, I wrote an amazing premise all the way through. You guys, check this out. I finished my first draft. Holy shit, I finished my second draft. Man, I got an editor. Oh my God, my cover. I queried. Whatever. You can have as much pride, enthusiasm, excitement, joy, whatever you want to call it. You can have as much as you want. And if your first thought after hearing that is, yeah, but isn't somebody going to make fun of me if I get like real hype about it? Pay very close attention to what I'm about to say, okay? If your first thought was, isn't somebody going to like judge me? Or isn't it bad to be all excited about it? Come here, right here, okay? Fuck them. Fuck them and the horse they rode in on. Those are joyless, unhappy people who are being critical of you being happy. How dare they? Don't let somebody else rain on your parade. Don't let anybody rain on your parade. If you want to be really proud that you wrote a great query letter, be proud that you wrote a great query letter. Nobody's going to take that away from you. Even if your query gets rejected 10 trillion times. You feel you wrote a good query letter. You worked really hard on it. You get to be proud of how hard you worked. You control the means of production, comrade. You get pride in that. It's okay to be proud of your work. It's okay to be proud of all the steps in the process, not just the finished steps, not just the end result. You can have pride the entire time. You know what set of conditions allow us to only have pride at the end? Hint, it rhymes with mapitalism. You can have pride the entire stretch. You don't have to reserve it for some end state. Every little thing can be a success that you can celebrate like you just won the Super Bowl. So if you have a great day and you smash like 6 goals, you just won the Super Bowl 6 times in one day. That's an amazing feat. Go have a root beer. Rad. You can do that. You can decide that. You're not bound or obligated by time. It doesn't matter. I'm not saying it's going to take you, a decade to figure out how to be a good writer. It might. It might take you 2 decades. It might take you 10 minutes. I don't know. None of us know. But the really important thing is that the only way we're going to find out is if you do it. But you are allowed to be proud of every little step. You don't have to be critical of every little step. I understand you are watching 1,000,000 trillion people, or what seems like 1,000,000 trillion people, hurling themselves around you, speeding towards whatever successes they have aligned. Whatever they've talked into existence, they're rocketing forward at. I know. And I know it can lead us to feel inadequate. I know it can lead us to feel ineffective. I know it can feel like we're all sucking and everybody else is great. But that's some fucking bullshit. It's just bullshit. Did you do a thing? Did you try your hardest? Are you proud of how hard you worked? Was it super successful? Did you try your best? And are you proud of how hard you worked? That's all you need. I know that sounds very simplistic compared to how excited we'd be if you made some money or whatever. But are you proud with what you did? Would you do it again? Did you learn anything? Would you try harder next time? What would you change? What would you do different? What questions do you have now that you didn't have before? What help do you know to ask for now that you didn't know before? How have you grown? How has this affected you? What positive impact has this had? Those are the things to worry about. Those are the things to ask, not the time. I'm in my 40s. Editorially, I'm a dinosaur. But I'm doing the best work of my life right now. Why? Because I'm doing some of the happiest work I've ever done in my life. Other people are more successful, John. Yeah, but I get to say fuck into this microphone. Those assholes are all uptight. But I'm proud of the work I did. And it took me this long to get here. Because I spent a lot of time fucking around. I spent a lot of time painting my metaphorical upstairses. Multiple upstairs. I wasted time. I found excuses not to succeed. And then I got really tired of it and I tried succeeding and it's working. It's not super fast. I'm $7 short on the mortgage. But hey, we'll figure it out at the end of the day. But by and large, the whole point here, the whole thing of this is that it doesn't matter how long it's going to take. And the more you sit there and obsess about your voice and obsess about how long it's going to take, the more you're taking your focus away from the successes you are having. And the more likely you are to not label them as successes, because you're only seeing success at the end of the race, when it's not even a race to begin with. Every accomplishment can be, should be, must be celebrated. One of the great crimes in this whole creative process is that we eliminate or delay or minimize those successes. And we shouldn't, because they will help motivate us and drive us forward and teach us stuff to make it easier to go forward and allow success to build upon success over and over and over and over again. But we don't do that. So no, I'm not saying it's going to take you, 2 to 3 years for every book, 3 books, and then you're successful. You could be successful with book 1. I don't know. We won't know until you try. But it's going to be okay. It's going to be a big deal. You just have to keep trying. Don't lose sight of your successes, please. Okay? Awesome. Great question. Love it. That's it. I don't have any. Do I have any more? Let's see. Hang on. I do. I have one more. I have one more question. All right. I got one more. Hang on. Okay, it's a writing history question. John, who decided how long ago were page count and word count limits decided for genres? Great question. It's about 100-ish years ago. 1920s, 1930s. Most of those things were decided. And then things like science fiction were boosted up over the course of like the 50, every 20 years or so, 2 decades. Those numbers are adjusted either up or down, mostly up, and mostly up by 5,000 to 10,000 words. Great history question. Good stuff. Big fan. Have a party horn. That's it, though. That's all I have. That's tonight. Thank you so much for that very kind tip that allows me to not only pay my mortgage, hooray, but also, have food. Actually, that's cat food. So that is mortgage and cat food, really the 2 most critical things in my life. Thank you. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. This was really good. It came out spicy, and I'm very pleased. And I hope you enjoyed this. I was really looking forward to doing this, and I hope that enthusiasm came across. Shall we get out of here, though? Do we have any other questions? Are there any other issues or things? Anybody else? Anything? Any stuff? Else we'll get out of here. It was a great stream, you know that? God damn it, I'm really proud of that. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to finish this tea. I'm going to get the audio out on the podcast feed. I'm going to spend, let's see, it took 10 hours to get the Monday night stream up on YouTube. Let's see if this one takes 12 because it's longer. Who knows? And then I'm going to sit down and watch something on television. I don't know. Maybe I'll go through Stranger Things. I don't know. I've got a huge backlog of stuff. I could watch Miss Marvel too. I'm already caught up on Kenobi. I finished Bosch. I'm working my way through my pile. We'll see. Anyway, I'm going to go hang out on the couch for a while with the cats and be very grateful to all of you for being here. And the next time I will see you, just before we hit the outro button, the next time I will see you right here, right back for the next thing we do, you and me, we're in this together, will be Monday, June 13th. Oh boy. I do not know what the topic's going to be. I think it's marketing. I'm reasonably certain it's going to be a marketing thing. The best ways you can find out what it's going to be are ask me on Twitter, twitter.com/awesome_John. Or jump over to patreon.com/JohnHelpsYouCreate, where I will announce it on the Discord at some point. But I don't really know what it's going to be. It's probably going to be marketing, though. But that is Monday, June the 13th at 7 p.m. Eastern. And the next time I'm here with your questions one more time will be Wednesday, June 15th. Next week. Until then, take good care of yourself. All power to all people. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for your kind attention. I hope this helped. If you have any questions, anytime, if you need help writing whatever it is you're making, if you need any kind of tool, support, encouragement, or whatever, jump over to writernextdoor.com. Go to the top where it says book an appointment. Book a free appointment. I'll talk to you. We can hang out. We can help you succeed. You are allowed to be good at this. If you're looking for more content, if you're looking for more stuff like this, go over to youtube.com/John Adamus. You can see the entire list of everything we've made. And if you're looking to support this, if you want to see this grow, you want to see more stuff like this, patreon.com/John helps you create. Until next time, my friends, I love you all. You're amazing. Have a great night. Take care of yourselves. See you.